Hi, everyone. It's Shauna here. It's actually Sunday afternoon. This seems to be my time to meet Michaela. We seem to be Sunday warriors. We're not in robes and bunny slippers today. However, we are working, and I'm so happy to introduce all of you. I'm sure actually it's probably the other way around. You probably all know who Michaela is. She's just killing it out there on LinkedIn, and she started a company called Grade A Social, Grade A Digital. My apologies. Yeah. And she's just doing amazing things. She's such a force, and so we're excited that she's coming to speak at Generation Now. And we're gonna have a few questions for her today. And I'll just Michaela, I'll let you just kind of elaborate on that introduction. I always like everyone to kind of give themselves a little bit of an intro, and you can just tell us what you're up to and who you are and something cool about yourself.
Cool, awesome. Okay, so I guess my story starts in 1986 when I was born. But the interesting part is about 2 years ago. I was put in a situation where I had been recently laid off, and got to this point in my life. I was about a month away from turning 30, which for women is it's a big deal. You start to think of yourself and your mom at that age, and my mom already had 2 kids and thought that I would have the big house and perfect. And what I found instead was that I was in the same situation over and over again, where I would work in a career for about 2 years and then move on to the next thing. And it just wasn't working out. So I took a step back and really reevaluated what it meant to have a dream career, what that actually looked like. Because what I found is it wasn't status, it wasn't money. And so I was like, well, what else is there? And for me, I jumped right back into something that has always been part of my life, which is writing. And I love social media, and looked at different platforms that I could start writing on, and figured that couldn't be Twitter because I am very long-winded. So any sort of idea that I would have would be like 100 bazillion tweets. And Facebook, I felt like, was a little bit oversaturated, and LinkedIn seemed to have this space for people that just wanted to keep it real. It was at the time very corporate, very rigid, very professional, whatever that meant at the time. And I decided to make that my new platform. So started writing articles on there. My article, How I Landed My Dream Job in 2 Weeks, on LinkedIn, ended up going viral. And that was really cool. And as a marketer, I kind of looked at it and said, well, what was it about this article that really resonated with people? And for one, it was serving a purpose other than just gaining followers or looking for big numbers. I was genuinely trying to help other job seekers because I felt like I had found something, techniques and strategies that other people needed to know about, rather than just sitting at home and waiting for great things to happen. And so my intentions were good, for one. And second, it was relatable. I was talking about things that people don't normally talk about. You know, normally when you lose a job or you're looking, it's very taboo to even talk about it in today's business world. So I kind of opened the doors for that and started just sharing my career experiences, you know, the nightmare interviews that I'd gone on, how my idea of success had changed, failure, confidence, harassment in the workplace, harassment on LinkedIn, just kind of started opening up all these conversations. And what I found was that it was really resonating with people. And over time, I've gone from, you know, a few hundred to 100,000 followers on LinkedIn. And that's where I'm at right now. So I have my day job. I was able to kind of build this demand where people just didn't know what I was doing, but wanted whatever I was doing, which allowed me to launch my own company. And in my free time, I say that very loosely, I spend time just writing and building communities and trying to help and mentor people on LinkedIn.
Amazing. That's truly awesome. And I think that's what you're right. Like, that's what resonates with people, is your authenticity and how you are. You do have a different perspective. And I think that's a really important perspective that people need to have, is it's not all about just getting likes and followers and building this sort of mass following. I mean, it's great to have a big following, but it's really about the deeper relationships that you can build and the support network that you can develop and all that stuff. So I think that's great. You've definitely got the right mindset for it. So one of my first questions was kind of turn back to that a little bit was about your authenticity. I mean, you use that to capture your audience's attention and to engage with them and develop that that audience. So do you think that works in both the good times and the bad? Because what I mean by that is, like people are always saying, oh, stay positive. But sometimes like business is really hard sometimes. And there are some days when you just want to sleep all day and do nothing. Right. And so how does that work? Because does that turn people off, or does that actually bring them closer to you, do you think?
I think that it's interesting. I had this conversation with somebody the other day, and it was about the fact that, I wouldn't be able to share the stories of failure if I hadn't been successful. And I agree with that to an extent, but I think at the same time, it's all about shifting your perspective on what success actually means. So for me, success for me is breaking out in nervous hives. And I've talked about this a lot, but one of my business partners, he made it one of my missions for 2017 to make myself break out in hives, because anytime I do that, it means I'm outside my comfort zone. So I'm in a great position because I've defined that as success, that I can't lose, right? As long as I'm doing things that scare me, I'm winning. So I think that it's really, and it's also about the purpose behind what you're sharing. Are you depending on your audience to make you feel better? And I think that's the difference between vulnerability and oversharing, is when you're depending on your audience to give you strength. And true authenticity is giving that energy and giving that strength to your audience by saying, this is what I've gone through, this is how I'm overcoming it, and this is how you can too.
That's interesting, actually. I hadn't even thought about it like that. I mean, if you are dependent on people kind of feeding back to you and constantly, like about it, then you're right. That's not necessarily a place where you should be seeking your strength. So it is sort of transferring confidence and strength and sharing the trials and the struggles, but also shedding light on the positivity and shedding light on the strength, and then having, balancing it out with the, all the good times and the happy. Yeah. So very cool. That's good advice. Because you are I know you don't like to be called an influencer, but I mean, the reality is you do have some influence. And so, and you've gained, you've obviously gained a lot of share of the market, if that's how you want to call it, or, gain people's attention. Essentially. So do you have, if you could give our audience, 3 tips, just 3 simple tips on how they can build their social media brand on a budget.
On a budget. Okay. Well, number 1 is recognize when you're making excuses. So this is a big one for me, because for a very long time, I actually got early access to LinkedIn's native video, and I didn't even touch it for about 2 weeks. And I like to think of myself as a pretty confident person, but there's something about the little red dot that says record that is a little bit terrifying, especially if you're a writer. You tend to hide behind your words. And so from going from writing, especially like I had done it for a year and a half, to video, was a pretty big jump. But I kept making the excuse that I didn't have the right lighting and I didn't have the right equipment and all this stuff. And I was talking to one of my other friends who also creates content, not so much on LinkedIn, but other platforms. And they mentioned, they're like, Michaela, as soon as we finish this phone call, you're going to get on video and you're going to do it. Yeah. And so my advice to other people is understand when you're in your own way, because I have talked to so many people and had done the exact same thing where I've convinced them, because all the time the excuse that I get is, well, I'm waiting for the right moment. I'm waiting for the right opportunity. I'm waiting until I'm successful. But the thing is that people aren't interested in the end result. They're interested in the process. You need to show what happens and goes on behind the scenes for people to actually care about what you're talking about. So I think that's number 1 is understand when you're making excuses. If you have a goal of writing on LinkedIn, stop waiting for this like bolt of like inspiration to hit you in the face. It's not going to happen. You have to sit down and you have to write. And the first few articles, especially for myself, were terrible. I got crickets, every single one of them. Yeah. And over time, it's a muscle, and you keep training it, and you learn and you experiment and you find your voice. And then all of a sudden, it's like tying your shoelaces. It's so easy. So that's number 1. Number two is, I would say, find your coffee mug. So for me, this was something that almost happened accidentally, but one of my very first profile photos was me holding a coffee mug. And it got to a point where people loved that photo so much, and it was so associated with my brand, that when I would post other photos and it didn't have a coffee mug in it, people would actually get angry and be like, "Where's the coffee mug?" And from that day, I became the coffee girl, and that's where that whole sign off love and coffee came from.
Cool.
It works well in the professional world, because what professional out there, I mean, God bless you if you can survive without coffee. I'm envious if you can do that, but lots of us need coffee to get through our days, and everybody needs a little love. So find your coffee mug.
I'm actually one of those people. Are you? Yeah, I just never liked it.
Oh, I'm so jealous. I'm so jealous.
I have other vices though, so don't worry.
Okay. Well, but even talking about your vices. So whether it's, if you love pizza, talk about the fact that you love pizza. It might be, I've seen other people and they do videos with their kids, and I think that's adorable. But find whatever makes you you and share that with the world. And it doesn't have to be something elaborate. It doesn't have to be, a top hat every single photo, but it's just something to give your audience some consistency. So that would be my second one. And number three is, do not be reactive, be proactive. So when I started, I would write articles and then I would just sit there kind of twiddling my thumbs, being like, okay, where are my friends at? And I realized over time that I had to put myself out there, and I had to start reaching out to other people, and I needed to, celebrate their work anniversaries and touch base with them and give whatever I could. And at the time it was knowledge and it was time. I had nothing but time when I was looking for work. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to use this, and I'm going to have, I'm going to give away consultations for social media, because that's the value that I have. And to this day, I still have people that will be like, okay, well, what do I give you in return? I'm like, well, good. I love giving. And I think that there's this misconception that if you give, you're almost like depleting yourself of something, and it couldn't be further from the truth. When you
I think it's the opposite. It's edifying.
It's the opposite.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. And people do the same with me all the time. I get the phone calls from people, and I'll, give them some advice. I'll spend half an hour with them and whatever. And I truly don't expect a thing back. But, I get people sending me gift cards and big thank yous and all this stuff. And I'm like, wow, it's amazing what happens when you don't expect anything.
Absolutely.
And you just give. So yeah, that's good advice.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So as an entrepreneur, I know you're probably very familiar with all the challenges that entrepreneurs face. And, and there's a variety of them, like, cash flow, getting new clients, angry clients, keeping them happy, failing sometimes, all the different things that, we all face, right? And the reality is no one has done it without a single failure. So how do you handle those challenges as an entrepreneur? And what is your sort of strategy around that?
Well, I think that the biggest lesson for me over 2017, and this is kind of combined with me becoming an entrepreneur and then also the work that I do on LinkedIn, is that you are not your work. And you might feel like the businesses that you're building and the work that you're putting out there is your blood, sweat, and tears. And that's not what I'm saying, but you have to understand that your work is separate from your being. Because as soon as your work becomes your identity, that's when things start to fall apart. So for me, anytime I'm starting to feel like I literally am the president of Grade A Digital, and that's who I am as a human being, I know that's when I need to take a step back and reevaluate, because I'm Michaela first, and this is what I do for a living, but that's not who I am. So I think having that separation is really helpful, especially because failure is inevitable. I fail every single day. And if you don't have that mindset, you're going to take all of those failures personally. It's not, I failed at this, it's I am a failure. And that's just a really dangerous path to go down.
I agree.
I think that's a big one. And I think that you also need to understand what the things that are truly important are. So for myself, and as soon as you get stuck in work mode, and if you love what you do, you feel like it's a be all and end all. And for me, I wrote a whole post on LinkedIn a couple weeks ago, or maybe like a month or two ago, and it was all about burnout and how, you know, at the end of the day, when I was struggling and I had an anxiety attack, who were the people that were by my side? They were my friends and my family. They weren't the people that I was emailing back and forth or getting quotes from or anything like that. They were my friends and family. So I think if you go into life understanding which relationships are most important, I think that's also really helpful.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And, you know, it's funny, Gary kind of said the same thing to me when I asked him that question. And he said it with a few more expletives, but in his that's why we live it. But yeah, he was saying, you know, like you have to focus on what, you know, get that perspective, get focus. I mean, you're not dying. You're not, you know, there's a lot of, you know, worse situations. And I think that's how we do. And it's funny, I watched a video yesterday and the guy was saying, you know, when he came back from moving or something, I can't remember the very beginning, but his car had been broken into and he had lost all this money and his laptop and all this pretty brutal stuff. And he said before he even like closed the door after opening it to realize that it was broken and someone had taken their stuff, he started to think, how is this going to become positive? Because there's that period of time when you're really upset by something, and then there's like this gap of time before you can look back on it and say, okay, well, what did I learn? And that was actually positive. And so he's like, I'm just going to like shorten the gap and start right now trying to figure out how this could potentially be positive for me and what down the road will I maybe think is positive from this situation. And he started thinking, well, I'm going to have some extra time with my wife now that we don't have our laptops. And I have, you know, and he like listed up all these cool things. And I was like, that's really interesting. And it's almost the same thing, getting perspective. You're just doing it very, very quickly. Oh. So I really liked that story. Anyway, I love it. So. Anyway, well, that's kind of the end of our interview, but I wanted to just thank you for coming and doing this with me today. And also, I'm so excited to see you at Generation Now.
I am so pumped.
Yeah.
So pumped.
It's going to be a great event where like there's all these new things happening like every day. Like the phone calls I get sometimes, I'm just like, how is this my life? Like it's unbelievable to me. Like just how many wonderful people are like, you know, coming. Like we've sold tickets all over the world, Michaela. Like you have no idea. People are coming from England and the Middle East and all over the United States. So we're really excited to be bringing everyone to Toronto, and I know you're going to give a great talk. And so I'm excited for you to share your wisdom to our audience. You're going to do great. I know
you're nervous hives and all.
Yeah, exactly. You can like kind of move your scarf to the side and be like, yeah.
I'll wear turtlenecks.
Awesome. So anyway, so thank you. And so everyone, if you want to come see Michaela speak at Generation Now on February 27th, so go to generationnowmovement.com and get your tickets today. And we'll see you soon, Michaela.
Bye.